All right, everybody. Welcome to the Hustle Harder Show. I am your host, James Gaskin. Excited to have everybody back today. Really excited for our guest. We are sitting here in Tampa, Florida. Actually, Clearwater, I think, technically speaking, but excited to have Scott Randall on. Scott is a client of ours and an investor and a builder here in the Tampa area. And so we're super excited to dig in and learn a little bit more about you and your business. And with that, maybe I'll hand it over to you for an introduction, and would love to learn a little bit more about exactly what you're doing and what that looks like.
Sure. Thanks for the intro. So, I'm a builder here, and I guess a real estate investor, like we'll talk about here in a little bit, here in the Tampa Bay market. I'm originally from Texas, so born and raised in Dallas. I went to SMU, got a finance degree, worked in the corporate world for a number of years. Had a pretty successful career. For my age, I was, on track. I was doing well and on track to do better. And my now wife, who I met in Dallas, decided she wanted to come back to Florida. My company got bought. There was an opportunity to leave and to go try something different. And I decided just right before I turned 30 that I wanted to move somewhere and figure it out. I didn't want to be stuck in Dallas with a great paying job with fantastic benefits and all the comforts if I didn't want to be in Dallas, right? I love Dallas, but I was ready to venture out, try something new. So that was my opportunity. Probably would have never left had the company not got bought and some things get switched around. So we moved to Florida, and no jobs, no job prospects, nothing, just was kind of looking for jobs here. And my cousin, who was a national wholesaler at the time, hooked me up with a local office here. And of course, I got the job. It's not hard to get hired by a wholesaler. And we did that for about 90 days or so, bought a deal from them, and the rest is history. So,
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Clean slate down to Florida. Now, your wife, she's from Florida?
Yeah. So she's from the other coast, the Orlando area.
Okay, cool. So what made you choose Tampa? What was it about Tampa?
Good question. So she went to school at Ringling, which is down in Sarasota, and spoke very highly of Sarasota. I swore I would never move to Florida. I wanted nothing to do with Florida. And then we looked at other cities in the South with good tax advantages and good weather. And we ended up visiting the Tampa Bay area for a couple of days when we were going to see our folks. And it was a no-brainer. It was like, wait a minute, you can buy this for this, and you're this close to the water, and you have world-class beaches, and wait a minute, what? Like, this is pretty sweet. And it's not Miami. I really thought Florida was Miami or Florida was Jacksonville. And Tampa is neither Miami nor Jacksonville, I can assure you.
In a good way.
In a good way, correct. Yes. So it's just different, right? So it's much more homey. It's a small town.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big small town. And so, yeah, we saw a lot of opportunity. Now at that period of time, she's in marketing, and she was working for, I think, the largest privately owned marketing firm in the country at the time. So she had a lot of analytical data at her fingertips, and she was able to crunch the numbers and look at growth rates and what people were doing, moving and shaking over here, and kind of confirmed our feelings towards it. And we packed up a U-Haul and came down.
Love it. So you're a finance guy.
Mm-hmm.
You sound like you're a pretty analytical guy, right? You guys, sounds like she is too, right? But crunching the numbers, kind of looking at it. And it sounds like it was fairly strategic. It sounds like a somewhat of an emotional decision. You liked it here. You felt good here. But it sounds like it was also a little bit, data driven, which I think is really cool. We as we've grown our business at Renovo, like we like to build these local, businesses, and we candidly, like we look at those numbers, but I think we're more focused on getting the right people, and I think Tampa has been great for us because number one, it's a fast growing market. And there's a lot. The data that you guys looked at is very real. A lot of people, I think, have seen the same thing about Tampa that you did. So there's a lot of folks moving here, a lot of growth, which is exciting. But I think we found somebody in John Robart, who you know really well, that has just been an amazing asset and has helped us build a great business here. And we're super excited about what we're doing in Tampa, and definitely excited to kind of dig in a little bit, because I think hopefully what we're doing is putting a little bit of a spotlight on the market here, which I think is well deserved. You guys, so you get to Tampa. At that time, you were basically clean slate, right? You had come out of this finance job. At that point, were you thinking real estate?
Yeah. So when I was in Dallas, so I graduated high school 2008,
Mm.
and I was in school in finance while everything was unfolding, 2009, 2010, 2000, learning about those things as they were happening. And then when I was in the corporate world, I was specifically in the risk management world. And I worked for a brokerage. We did a lot of consulting. I got to look into a lot of people's, books, examine a lot of different companies and business models. And what was really fascinating about it was, I got to see people's growth periods and unfortunately, people's demise. I saw a lot of companies go under. I saw a lot of companies that were over leveraged, that were selling their assets for pennies what they had bought it for before. I saw a lot of people who just weren't ready for what happened, right? I mean, nobody was, but some more than others.
Sure.
And so at that period in time, I'd been in my career for a few years. I was doing well, and it was time to start looking at maybe buying a house, or I always wanted something more. I was always very entrepreneurial, so I was thinking about doing something on my own. And I felt like Dallas had grown to a point that was very difficult to get in, where it was probably a safer market than most others at the time. But I felt like the rate of return that I was looking for wasn't going to happen there. Now, I was wrong. It kept booming, right? That was 5 years ago. But it's hard when you're from a town where you're used to things selling for this, and now they're selling for 4x that. It's hard to see it. So I wasn't looking at real estate specifically. It was one of the many things I looked at. I worked in a kitchen for a day. I thought maybe being a chef would be cool. I trained dogs with a guy for a couple weeks. I at the time I was paying dog trainers like $150 an hour. I was like, that's a pretty good living. Play with dogs all day, make $150 an hour. So I did other things as well. I kind of experimented for a few months while we were packing up and moving over here. But like real estate, it was a fantastic time to get in. It's a big ticket item. It's a great asset class. So, it wasn't real estate specific. I kind of eased into that.
Yeah.
I tell people I accidented into it and fell in love with it. So
sometimes those are the best things, right?
Yeah.
Those happy accidents. But I think what's cool is that you sounds like you really were open to a lot of different, potential futures, right? And real estate, obviously, I think from an investment standpoint, you can point to a lot of very wealthy families that have made a lot of money in real estate. Seems to be a pretty common thing for folks who have been very, very successful. So it makes sense. And obviously, we've been going through quite the boom, especially in Texas and in Florida. As a fellow Texan, certainly can identify with that. So you got a little taste of real estate with the wholesaling opportunity, and bought a deal and kind of got into it. So take us from then to where your business is today. I know you do a number of things. So, what does that all look like as it sits here?
First, I want to talk a little bit about my first deal. So the first deal I bought, I didn't have any money. I mean, no money. Right before I moved from Texas, I paid off everything that I owed anybody. Car, I didn't own a home at the time, student loans, whatever it was. I came over here debt free with a clean slate. And that was really important to me, is I wanted to be able to make a decision for what I was going to do. But I was considering staying in my career as well. I wasn't unhappy in my career. I just felt like there could be something more that I could have more direct control over, that I could possibly enjoy more. So I was taking some time to figure that out. What led me to get into the real estate deal at first, the wholesaling, provided a little bit of cash up front, no big deal, but I still didn't really have any money. And one of the guys I was wholesaling a home to was like, well, why don't you take a deal down? And I was like, because I don't have any money, right? And I'm uncomfortable borrowing that amount of money, right? I don't have anything to back it up with.
Right.
I didn't have any money. I didn't have any debt, but I didn't have any money. And he goes, well, I'll lend you whatever you need. And I'm like, okay. Some guy I don't know who I met. I think I'd been in Florida a month, maybe. Never bought a piece of property. never done a deal, never swung a hammer, never been in construction. And I'm like, you're just going to give me money? And he was like, yeah. So I found a deal. Nobody wanted to buy it. Everybody thought it was too beat up. It was in a low income neighborhood. It was a 20s bungalow with the roof opened up, the floors opened up, the walls opened up. I mean, it had a lot of problems. And I was like, dude, this is a deal I believe in. It just made sense to me. I don't know why it made sense. It was a beautiful house. It was on a nice piece of property. It was 15 minutes from world-class beaches. And it was like $55,000. I was like, what do you mean nobody's gonna buy this? Everybody locally was like, we're not buying there because it's too, it's a war zone. It's a tough neighborhood. He said, how much do you need? I said, all of it. And he didn't realize when I said all of it, when it came to the closing table, he thought I was coming up with the closing cost because that's normal.
Right.
I didn't have the closing cost. I mean, I needed all of it. So he wrote me a check for all of it. And, I think we were projected to make like 25,000 on that. I think we probably went 30 or 40K over our rehab budget. And I think we ended up making like 60 on it.
Wow.
And so that was the precipice, right? That was like, hey, I can do this. I learned a lot because I built the whole house from scratch. I mean, I was there every day on the job site, watching trades. I hired very good, competent contractors. We did everything from the foundation up through the roof, landscaped the yard, scraped it, trees, windows, electric, plumbing. I mean, we did everything. Refinished the hardwood floors, trusses, structural stuff, opened up walls. So there wasn't anything, when I left that house, there wasn't anything that I felt like I hadn't touched that I didn't know about. And so it gave me a little bit of capital to get started. It gave me a lot of confidence. And it really sparked this thing in my head. I've never been a particularly creative person, but I enjoyed watching something that I was impacting grow, right? Like almost like growing a kid or something. Like,
Yeah.
it was like my baby.
Yeah.
Like I took this uninhabitable space that nobody could live in. That was a nuisance for the neighborhood. And, and when the end buyer came to see it, she was like, wow, this is amazing. This is what I've been looking for. And it was super fulfilling. So I found everything, right? I found the cash, I found fulfillment, I found interest, and I liked being out and in the hustle and bustle. So I was like, let's do it again. And
I love it. That's awesome. What a great story, because it's almost like the fact that you were so open kind of allowed that to happen, right? You're willing to kind of move around, do some different things. Did you have a background in construction prior to that?
No.
So you basically, the first project you did was kind of like it's almost like your undergrad or maybe even your master's degree in construction, because you really got to see every element of what it takes to do one of these things. That's a pretty neat deal. So you obviously this person that you were wholesaling to that lent you the money.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still a relationship that you have today?
It was one and done.
Is that right?
Yeah, it was. Ironically, he's a great guy, but right after that, he was like, well, now you got a little bit of money in your pocket. So now he wants to charge me regular terms, wants me to put down payments down. And at that point, there's a couple other guys that were kind of seeing what I was doing. And they also wanted, had money they wanted to put out. So, then it was kind of on, right? It was some JVs. I was kind of doing a couple of my own, a couple of JVs with people, still figuring it out. But to touch base on the construction, I think something, I was told, a long time ago when I was a kid, there's 3 stages of learning, right? You don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then you know what you don't know. And then you know what you know, right? And I definitely didn't learn construction on that job, right? I could have done 10 or 15 of those and still not known construction. I think a lot of flippers, they get so used to remodeling these houses that they also feel like contractors. And I think a lot of them would tell you, I'm basically a contractor. They know what contractors know.
Sure.
And I definitely learned there what I didn't know. I got to taste everything.
Yeah.
But I really learned how deep each of these trades go, right? There is a front and a back to drywall.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's different wires for different things. It's not all, run from and some of that stuff sounds real basic, but you can almost trick yourself after you've done 10 or 20 or 30 of them into thinking, I know plumbing, I know roofing, I know electric, but you forget that there's entire disciplines that people go to school for years to learn about to make these systems work in conjunction with each other. And I didn't learn about that till many, many, many deals later. So yeah, let's not pretend I did one deal and all of a sudden became an expert in construction, right? But it piqued my curiosity for sure.
And I think the cool thing about that story is that it for some people, to your point, they would go through that experience and like, oh, I'm an expert. This one worked out great. I know what I'm doing. But I think it sounds like your takeaway was actually an appreciation for how complex and how deep some of those things actually are. And so instead of feeling like, oh, I got this, and I know you said you came out of it with a lot of confidence, but you did something that you'd never done before,
right.
and it worked. And it sounds like you kind of you got a taste, and you had the confidence that you could put it together, but not necessarily that like, oh, I know everything I need to know about this stuff. And not everybody has that reaction, right? Some people are the humble is not always a word you associate with real estate investors, people in general, right? But I am curious because you said when the subs and the contractors that you had work on that project were all really good. How did you find them? How did that come together? Because I think a lot of investors out there really struggle sometimes to find the right subs and the right folks that can execute at a high level without causing also lots of problems. So
sure, yeah. So great point. They were not all really good. If I said that, I misspoke. Some of them were awful. I mean terrible, awful people. I think I had a guy that kind of almost overdosed one day. I definitely caught people drinking and throwing bottles up under the house. I caught people doing drugs on site. All of those people were fired. I think I went through like 14 contractors.
Oh, wow.
Right. On that job. I ended up with a great team. I ended up with people who really knew. Something that I really took away from that was the price that you pay doesn't necessarily equal the work that you get. Typically, the cheapest people are cheap for a reason. But just because you bring in, at one point I got fed up and I was like, I'm just gonna bring in a real contractor. And they weren't necessarily great either. So a lot of it is underwriting the personalities, underwriting the people, doing your diligence, walking their jobs, asking the right questions, and knowing that managing subcontractors is tough. Being a subcontractor is tough. It's a very tough lifestyle. It's a tough gig. It's hot out here in Florida. You're dealing with people's, personalities and people's attitudes. And like you get out there in the heat of 105 degrees summer and 80% humidity and swing a hammer for 6 hours and have some 20-year-old kid run up to you and tell you, it doesn't look the way you want it, right? I mean, it's a frustrating thing. It's a frustrating position to be in. So I searched far and wide, and I still have, I'm still always looking for good people to join the team, right? There's never a shortage of good people that do good work.
Without a doubt. How did you get introduced, or how did you find it? Did somebody like the guy that you were that helped fund the deal? Did he make introductions for you?
No.
Did you just found people on your own?
Yeah. So a couple people I had sold deals to were contractors themselves or new contractors. I don't think I really ended up using much of them. I found people at Home Depot. I found people on Craigslist. I asked neighbors. I asked friends that I knew in the business at the time. I was still really new. I'd only been in Florida maybe 90 days at that point. So I was still kind of, I didn't know who was what, when, where. But I think that when you take the price out of the equation and examine the people, you'll answer a lot of your own questions, right? A lot of people get driven by, man, this number is really, okay, take the number away, look at the person, talk to the person and say, is this somebody you want to work with for the next 2 months?
Yeah.
And you'll weed a lot of the not so great folks out.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point. And I think it applies really almost to any business, any like people, man. We lend money, right? But I believe we're in the people business.
Sure.
We're both in the people business in terms of like the team that we build and the customers. It's not a transaction, it's a relationship. And I think, when you're especially in the world of contractors and subcontractors and construction, right? You're absolutely right. There's a lot of folks running around that are not amazing what they do and or cause a lot of issues as well, right? So like being able to evaluate people But you said something about being on the job site every day. That's an interesting thing, right? Because as a result, because you were there, and I know you were also getting your own education, right, and learning, but being on the job site, you're going to see stuff that, if you're passively kind of running those operations, you miss. And, it can be really meaningful. Is that something, and I know we haven't dug too far into what your business looks like today, because I know you are also a builder and contractor for others, right? But, do you try to be on the job site, especially your own, as much as possible these days? Or do you have some GCs or guys on the team that are really good at monitoring, making sure everything is going the way it's supposed to?
Yeah, I still like to be on the job site. I just enjoy being on the job site. I like watching things happen. I like learning how people do things differently. I'm not on the job site as much now as I was back then. Sure. Obviously, we have a lot more job sites, and there's a lot, there's a back office to run as well. Being on the job site then helped show me, what to do as much as what not to do. And it helped give me a little bit more confidence. There's things, there's a lot of nuances in construction. There's nomenclature. There's some people will call it the same thing 3 different names, or some people will build the same thing 3 different ways. And it doesn't mean that they're wrong. Doesn't mean that they're right. They're just different. There's more than one way to skin the cat. And so by talking with people, something else I did that I failed to mention was when I did find a couple guys that I knew their stuff. Like I knew this guy had flipped a ton of houses and did really good work, or I knew this guy was a high-end contractor. Maybe I couldn't afford those guys, but I would pay them to consult as well. So very early on, I had, say, an engineer that would do my engineer drawings. And I would say, hey, can you come to the job site at this stage and tell me what you think of the work? If somebody framed a house up for me, I wouldn't know if it was good or bad framing, because I hadn't walked 1,000 job sites with framing and seen the variations. So I was smart enough to hire, or I think I was smart enough to hire people much smarter than I was and know, hey, come out and show me. Like, be picky. I'm not going to fire the guys. They're not going to be in trouble. Just tell me, what do you think about this? Does this look lazy? Does this look good? Does this look bad? And, I'd pay like $350 an hour for that, which seems like a lot of money. But, if you're going to make, let's say, $40,000 on a deal, and by the end of it, you had them come, 4 or 5 times to the job site to point stuff out, it doesn't move the needle, right? You're going from 40 to 38, right? Like that's not changing your lifestyle.
It's value.
Right?
There's real value there.
Look, a finance degree from SMU is $250,000, right? Right? Like, spend a little bit of money and learn, right?
For sure.
And don't learn, I wasn't hiring a drywall guy to come show me. I was hiring a professional engineer or contractors that I knew were way out of my league that wanted, there was no way they were coming to work on my jobs. They were like, dude, you're small fries.
Right.
We're building houses on Bayshore. We're building houses on the beach. We don't have time to mess with you. Okay, well, for $350 an hour, you'd be surprised you can get to come out to your job site and give you some pointers.
That's extremely smart. And I think it goes back to you mentioned earlier, kind of the 3 stages of knowing, right? And you're in that know what you don't know, or trying to figure out what you don't know stage. And so being humble and willing to be like, hey, I would love somebody to come out and just make sure this is going the right way. And you're going to learn so much from each of those interactions. Is that just an idea you came up with? Did somebody suggest that to you? Like, how did you come up with that plan?
Well, I was scared out of my mind that I had hired a couple guys to do things that looked good to me. And then I had someone come look at it and go, dude, this is totally wrong.
Yeah.
And I realized I've always taken it very seriously that, I've always taken the fact very seriously that we're building houses that somebody's going to spend their life savings on and somebody's going to live in. And that house has to be built to a standard that's safe. I mean, I couldn't imagine if one of my houses, got blown away in a hurricane and it was something that was preventable, something I could have done something different, or if somebody were to get injured or were to burn down, or, these things happen every day. Unfortunate things happen every day. And since my first day, I've always taken to heart the gravity of the responsibility that we have, right, as real estate investors and as contractors, to say like, hey, someone's going to raise their family here. And if the roof leaks, when that water comes in and it rains on, their grandmother's last photo who had passed away and it gets ruined, right? Like that's on me, Look, accidents happen.
Sure.
Even in the best situations, you hire the best people, things happen, right? So from the get, I've always been very intentional and try to be very pointed about doing the right thing, and I haven't always done the right thing, right? Knowing now, I look back at some of the practices I had back then, and I was like, I wish I could go back and do it differently. Part of the growth, part of the learning.
It's a process.
Yeah, but I think what we do is a very serious thing. We're talking about, people go out and spend $30,000 on a car, and that's a 5-year event for them. And then they go out and spend $300,000 on a house.
Yeah.
That's a 30-year event for them. And let's not even talk about, a lot of people never get to experience that.
Right.
Right. So the people who do, I want to make sure that the safety precautions have been taken, life safety things within the home, electrical, things like egress windows, waterproofing, all these little details that go into the building process are done as correctly as they can be.
Sure.
Right, to the highest and best, which is how we got to where we are today. Is by having that level of detail, we started to build a reputation, and people started going, "Wow, we really like what you build. Would you come do work for us?" And so, just by putting the customer first and thinking, this isn't an investment that I'm making to make a bunch of money. Yes, that's hopefully the outcome that happens, but thinking about who's my end buyer, what's their lifestyle, and thinking I want to put something out that I can be proud of, and that they can live in and have a home that they can be proud of. It's worked for us.
I think that's great. And, listen, I'm sure if you sat most builders down in a room, they'd say, of course, we want to make the houses safe. But I think it's really great to hear kind of the why for you, and like the deeper, kind of the way you look at it. I think it's really cool. And it's great to, when your builder takes it that seriously, that's got to be comforting, you know? And at the end of the day, like, it's focusing on the customer, putting out a really great product, and doing that because it's the right thing to do. And then the downstream effects of that are you've now built, a really nice contracting business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about what your business looks like today. I know you do some things for yourself, stuff that you're retaining, or investment properties that you're working on. You're doing things for others. Like what is kind of the 30,000 foot of your business look like, today?
We very quickly scaled from doing that one to doing a couple more for myself. I never really had, especially in the early days, I didn't have enough capital or enough desire. I didn't want to take on the risk. I didn't want the risk on my balance sheet to do a ton.
Mm-hmm.
So I found myself not being super busy. I could flip 2 houses at a time without too much stress. So I started JVing with people. I started, managing some folks' projects for out-of-town investors. And I realized, well, this is kind of nice. You buy a house from contract to closing to, remodeling to listing and selling. Sometimes it's a 6-month, or in some of the projects we're doing, it's a year process. You don't get paid till the end. So it was nice to be able to take on some other jobs in the meantime to kind of keep the bills paid, right? And keep cash flow coming through. Because in construction, in the construction business, cash flow cash is king. It's a huge issue. It's the reason most construction companies fail. So as I was learning these things, I started to realize that knowledge is worth something. And I had a lot of out-of-town investors that I had sold deals to when I was a wholesaler that were starting to drop like flies. I mean, hey, my contractor ripped me off. He stole $50,000. I had a guy bought 3 houses, hired a contractor for all 3. He took licensed contractor, pulled the permits, started demo, took $75K and took off, And so, Florida is notorious for having difficulties with their contract labor.
That was polite.
Yeah, and having issues, not having some of the highest quality labor, which is why we have such strict laws, which is why we have such strict regulations. I mean, construction in Florida is highly regulated,
mm-hmm.
much more regulated than other states. So, as I started learning how to deal with permits and how to deal with windows and how to deal with Florida product approval codes and what products you could and couldn't use in Florida in certain areas and flood zones. These guys that were out of town were like, listen, I need someone on the ground that could do this. Would you do it? And I never wanted to get locked up as someone's project manager or someone's partner, but I was willing to do it on a case by case basis. And it allowed me to get more reps in. It allowed me to keep some money coming in. Frankly, it allowed me to make some mistakes on projects that weren't mine. And, at some point, just getting the reps in is what matters, is what's key. So we started kind of carving out the construction business well before I was a licensed contractor, right? And building up that expertise. At some point, it seemed like a natural next step to get a contractor's license, which is very difficult to do here in Florida. I had been working under a GC for a few years at that point to, on my own projects and helping them with others and learning. So that allowed me to get my experience. In Florida, it's 3 exams to get a contractor's license. They're about 6 hours each. There's 18 or 19 textbooks. And kind of the joke is like, it's an open book exam, but like 19 books, right? Like, so when people come in, they bring boxes and boxes of, we're talking textbooks. We're not talking pamphlets, right? So, it's a big deal. So when I got the contractor's exam, it kind of, when I was able to study and complete and met all the requirements and get my contractor's license, it kind of validated me as somebody who knew what I was doing. And I think a lot of other investors were getting stuck at the time, and they grew more into the real estate world where they were finding deals, they were finding capital and hiring guys like me. And where I went much deeper into the construction side, I found the construction side very interesting. And so it was a good marriage. So I started having guys, hey, I was working on this project. I didn't pull permits. I got red tagged. Now they're coming back and they're saying this and this and this is wrong. I don't know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for 3 or 4 or 5 months. I can't seem to get anywhere. And I go, okay, I know how to do these things. I know what you're looking at as an investor. I know what's important to you. I'm not going to come in like a homeowner contractor that might have a different perspective on things. I'm going to come in very ROI driven. I'm going to come in very tactical. There are certain things that we're going to spend a lot of money on to get it done quickly, because I understand that you're paying a lender and that there's a clock ticking on that lender. And then there are certain things that we're going to try to get done as economically as possible because we've got some time on. And so I didn't have any aspiration to grow a giant business. It worked. I don't think it would work at scale, but it worked, for the 5 or 6 guys that I was helping out at the time. And then, grew into what we have now.
Got it. So what is what you have now?
Yeah. So now I build spec builds for myself. I still do flips, although we haven't done one in a little while. I'm doing some spec builds for a couple clients. I've got some real estate investors that, they've done hundreds and hundreds of deals, but now they want to do like ADUs behind their rental properties, for instance.
Sure.
And they don't know the process of ground up construction. Floors, paint, kitchens, baths, they can do with their eyes closed. When it comes to, footers and footings and structural detail and framing and block, they don't know those guys. So it's a great, great marriage. So they handle the small stuff for their projects. And then when they get an addition or a vacant land and a piece of vacant land that they want to build a spec home on, they call me and we work together.
Got it. So what would you say is the breakdown? If you just roughly, is it like a third? How does that break down for you?
I think the goal is to get to a third of our own internal stuff, a third of investor stuff, and a third of retail stuff.
Got it.
And we've been doing the investor stuff. We've got that down pretty well. We've been doing our in-house stuff. The investor stuff, when you're a contractor only working on your own projects, there's a lot of stuff you get away with that you can't do when you have clients. I didn't have billing software. I didn't have estimating software. I didn't have contracts. So it took a little while to start building out that back end. And we're still working on it, frankly. Investors, you get a lot more slack, right? Because if the price is right and the work quality is right, there's a lot they'll forgive.
Sure.
Right. And there's a lot of trust there. And investors are flying by the seat of their pants as much as as much as contractors are a lot of times. So now we're starting to make our way into the retail world.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, I get a lot of contractors that say, I'm doing everything I can to get away from the retail world.
Right.
I'm trying to only work with investors or do my own stuff. But, we'll see. We're going to try it out. We've done a couple, projects for homeowners, and it turned out successful. And so we're going to take a couple more. And I think we're doing hopefully we'll be doing a custom home for a gentleman here soon in South Tampa, big, multi-million-dollar custom home. And we'll see what those challenges are like, and what it's like interfacing with customers. And look, if we don't like it, we won't do it again.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think that's great. I think that's a really cool thing about your business is, right, you're kind of in this place where you can sort of experiment and find what works and let that happen naturally. It seems like a natural extension of what you're doing, right? To go into the retail side. I would think, and from my experience and from the folks I know that are in the building, world, contracting world, that the big difference is that, and I think you alluded to it, investors are a little more ROI driven, a little more pragmatic. The retail side is more emotional.
Sure.
Right. And so like just dealing with, being able to manage the emotional element of somebody who is who's spending millions of dollars to build their dream home. There's particulars, right, that may or may not, make a ton of sense, but like it's just what they want, right? And just being able to, different type of customer to manage. But I suspect if you can figure that part out, it's a really nice compliment, and it diversifies your business too, right? Because, investors, there's lots going on in the world of investing, and sometimes there's not as much going on as others, right? But it doesn't seem like you guys are having that problem much down here in Tampa these days in terms of, well, actually, I guess I'll ask you, right? Like, how are you seeing the Tampa market? What does it look and feel like to you today? And kind of how are you thinking about the next couple of years as it relates to the local market here?
I am not the eternal optimistic. I think most real estate investors are. I am very much a contrarian. So when I hear, I don't watch the news or listen to the news much, but when I hear people are rah about certain things, I kind of stop and take pause and think, okay, maybe these people are a little overexcited, a little overzealous. And conversely, when people start thinking the world is coming to an end, I kind of take pause and go, well, is it really as bad as everyone says it is? I think that's important, right? As a real estate investor, to try to manage your own emotions. Because, man, I tell you, it is easy to get lost in CNN or something and doom and gloom. And especially early off as an investor, you're, analysis paralysis, you're underwriting interest rates 6 months out. And what's the market going to be like when I get done with this and that? And I'm trying to build, 10 years ago, we didn't have as much volatility as we do today. And so it was a lot easier to take on a project that was year long and exit with a certain amount of certainty. Where now, like, every 6 months looks totally different than the last 6 months. So, trying to make decisions today for something that you're going to build a year out is tough, right? So, I try not to get too much in the weeds with those. I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to answer it in a roundabout way. Our business model is very practical. Our business model is we take spaces that are uninsurable or unlivable or unfinanceable, and we make them financeable, insurable, and livable. Pretty much it. So I'm not the guy that's buying a house and painting it and putting it back on the market.
Right.
I'm the guy buying a house that is torn up and has mold, or the pipes are cracked, or has not been tube wiring. Or I'm buying a vacant land, right? And I'm putting it into use, putting it into production, adding more inventory online. So some of the risks that I see in the market, I think we're avoiding, right? Because we're not, I think there are definitely risks in the market. I think Tampa here locally is poised for growth. I think that's probably a common consensus. Do I think that you're going to be able to buy stuff off MLS and put paint and floor on it and sell it for $100,000 more in 6 months from now? I don't know. I'm not betting on it. I'm not doing it, right? Do I think that there's going to be a demand for inventory? Sure. I think that's natural in the United States. Everyone's, there's going to be demand for inventory, specifically in Florida, specifically in Tampa. Tampa's doing great. Seems to be doing great. It definitely feels like there's a lot more good restaurants here than there was 5 years ago when I moved here.
Yeah, that's one good signal for sure.
There's a lot more to do socially. The cost of living has gone up significantly, which is a concern of mine. But I think specifically the luxury market in Tampa is where there's real opportunity. If I'm being speculative, right? Which I try not to be speculative. I try not to speak on things I don't know, and nobody knows what's going to happen, right? But I think that the luxury market in Florida is going to take off. It is taking off. It's already. I mean, look, 5 years ago, you could buy a brand new house on Davis Island for $1 million. You know, dirt was going for a few $100,000. I think last year they bought Jeter's house for 20 mil or 22 mil, and they're demolishing it, tearing it down, building a new house, right? So, I mean, I think one of the realtors in town recently sold a lot for $5 million on Davis Island that blew everyone's mind. So, I think there's a lot of value to be had in the luxury market here. I think that the cost of living raising so rapidly is concerning. It's concerning around the country. I don't think Tampa is any different there. I don't know how lower incomes and medium incomes are going to be affected by that. All we can do is just hope for more job growth and wage growth and good investments. That's all we can do.
I think that's right. Definitely there was a time where, you could buy stuff off you could buy a retail off the MLS, you put a little money into it. And even if you didn't do anything to it, if you just held it for 6 months, it's worth more and you make money. Those days are gone, right? And I do think that, you're alluding to the point that you kind of have to be better now. And I think you have to be strategic. Every market's a little bit different, but affordability is kind of just a national problem. I think that spans all markets in the US. How people are addressing that affordability is a different question. And I think lots of ways to do it. Seems to be, build for rent is a big thing because I think a lot of the things you're pointing out, right? The cost of living, the elevated interest rate environment, which we have, really no way of knowing where that's going. A lot of people speculate it's going to come down a little bit in the future. That'd be great. But, probably never getting to the twos again, or at least not. Let's just hope it doesn't get to the twos because honestly, that means something really bad happened.
Sure.
But, listen, I think it's going to be harder and harder to afford homes. The inventory imbalance is very, very real. We all know that. And I don't think, and as a result, it's holding prices up. It's not like prices are coming way down in really any market. So I think a lot of people are going to be kind of trapped in renting for a while. I think that's a reasonable assumption, at least in a lot of different markets. But I think you got to find the opportunities, and it has to be, a match for your business model too, right? And I know, we talked a little bit about this before, and I want to get into it a little more. But you're not necessarily trying to run this massive enterprise operation today, where you need the volume. You can be a little more strategic in the opportunities that you go after, right? Which I think is a very good thing. It gives you a lot of flexibility to move within what kind of makes sense in the environment. Whereas I think there are some folks out there that have built pretty large businesses that need the throughput to keep it all working. And then you get into a place where you start making weird decisions, right? Because it's not really driven by the fundamentals. It's driven by another kind of outside factor.
Sure.
And that can get you in trouble, right? And I think it's great to be in a position to not have to have those additional pressures, and you can really just take a fresh look at the market and where do I feel like there's the best opportunity to put my time and effort to work to make a return, right? And do you raise capital from outside sources, or is it all in-house money?
Yeah, no, we use John and partner with Renovo on some stuff. We've got some private lenders still that like to lend us money. We JV on some stuff where guys will bring the deal. Oftentimes if it's a JV, it's somebody who is newer and has looked into a great deal, I like to say.
Sure.
And they need an operator to take that down with them. And luckily I have, the capital partners or access to the capital partners if the deal's right, and obviously the experience to do the deal. So we're doing a lot of that. I think that home affordability is a really interesting topic, a really interesting conversation. I think that, you see a lot of data on inventory levels and how we don't have enough inventory. We need more and more and more inventory. And then everyone goes out and builds a bunch. And then what happens? Then more supply comes online and your basic economics of supply and demand happen. There's an interesting article I read. I remember 2020, 2021. I was a real estate investor at the time, and I was listening to a lot of very well-respected real estate investors at the time speak. Some local, some that I knew, some national, some that I didn't know. And the consensus seemed to be, the whispers seemed to be that we were overheated, and that the market was high and that it was getting crazy expensive. It's $1,300 a month to rent this basic, POS house down the street. One night I read this article online, and it was about how right now was the most, and this was it might have been an article from 2019 that I was reading in 2020 or 2021, but it was how right now is the best time in human history. It's the time in human history where humans have the best opportunity of owning a home ever. Ever. And it goes, back, it goes back as to, back then, people had to build their own homes. It was very difficult to do. It took a whole village. And then eventually, people started building homes professionally, and we got financing and access to capital. And then, but still it was very expensive to move the materials. And it was, back then people say you could buy a Sears and Roebuck home for so much, right? But then you have to build it. That's just the components. You have to get it there on a train. You have to build, and it goes through, wage growth and nominal interest rates and inflation. And it talks about how I think at that time rates were probably in the 4s or 5s, if I had to guess, maybe low 6s. And they were like, look, if you look at today, how easy it is to get a mortgage, what it takes to get a mortgage. It wasn't as easy to get a mortgage then as it was in 2007 or 2008, but there was different things that made it challenging in 2007, 2008.
Sure.
And the argument was that it was the easiest time to become a homeowner ever in the history of mankind in the United States of America. And I just thought it was so interesting that you have this very well-respected economist who was giving this completely opposite perspective of kind of what you're hearing in the real estate market, right? And COVID happens, and we learn what real unaffordability is. Everyone's like, man, the housing market's overheated. It doesn't have anywhere to go. At the time, a lot of people were, hey man, you should probably think about just wholesaling because we don't really know where this market's going to go, and things, they can't go up much longer. And there was rumors of an automobile debt bust, right? Which I think there's still rumors of the automobile debt bust. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but this was 4 years ago. We certainly made a lot of money in the last 4 years, without that happening. So I think the conversation around affordability of homes is something that real estate investors need to be thinking a lot about, right? Are we just going to, as people, are we just going to allocate a higher percentage of our income and that's just going to become a new norm? Are we going to do more multifamily transitional living where, we go back to how our parents live in our homes with us, or people stay in the home longer? Are we going to go, back to where kids start working? I think right now kids work later and later and later in life than they ever have. Are kids going to start, how's it going to change us culturally? Something's going to have to change, right? I don't think the prices are going to go down.
Doesn't seem so.
No,
it doesn't seem so.
It costs what it costs to build a house. And unfortunately, those costs are not going to go down.
Well, you mentioned the supply side thing, right? Like the supply side issue is not enough homes on the ground. And, you mentioned like the idea of, well, people are going to go build and put new supply, but there's a lot of constraints around that, right? And they're local municipalities and the entitlement process, the permitting process, inspections. Like I was in Charlotte last week doing an event for a bunch of investors that are clients of ours out of our Charlotte office. We were playing golf actually with one of these guys, and he was telling me he had, I think it was 26 units of single family development that he was working on, that he was 3 years into, and he was still working to get the entitlements. He was 3 years into just getting the land entitled so that he could build that project. That's wild. Like we will never catch up the supply side to the demand if it takes 3 years to get entitlements to build 26 units. Like, you know what I mean? And I think that's different in every market. I've noticed that in North Carolina, it's pretty bad. What's that like here? What's the entitlement process here? The municipality, like, are you able to get projects, moving pretty quickly? What is, how do you think about that part of the business?
It sucks. It's terrible here. Like I said earlier, Florida is extremely highly regulated in the construction industry. Our local municipalities are understaffed, and things are constantly changing and developing their processes. As leadership changes, those guys are city workers. They're not the highest paid individuals. A lot of them are folks that have advanced degrees and have a lot of great experience, and they work for not what they could get paid elsewhere, right? So it's a tough gig.
Totally.
And I think that what a lot of people don't see behind the scenes is that as we become more environmentally conscious as a nation, as a people, and as we start to become smarter, we're realizing that we have to up the standard a little bit. And so building practices are getting better. Homes are getting built tighter. So there's a lot of retraining, retooling going on of what the minimum SEER on an AEC is and what the minimum standard is for building tightness and for energy efficiency and just like your appliances, where 30 years ago your appliance would run for 50 years because it was all mechanical, and now it's electric, right? So now your motherboard goes out every 3 to 5 years. I'm told that's because now they're trying to run it more efficiently, more energy efficiently. So I think there's a lot of stuff going on nationally, statewide, and locally with looking at land, looking at density, looking at drainage, looking at how our water moves, trying to be intentional about not overbuilding or underbuilding and not stressing out local infrastructure. Right? There's a lot of old infrastructure in Tampa right now that's being rebuilt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the codes are increasing, and that's what's making it tough, right? I mean, 20 years ago, people didn't care about energy efficiency of your building. Now it's just more hoops to jump through. It's more engineering that's involved, just more people that have to be intelligent and have more hands on deck, which creates more red tape. It's a two-sided sword, right? At one point, you think, well, I don't want the government involved in any of my stuff. I just want to be able to go do my building and put inventory online. But then the other side, the government's going, well, we don't want people out here building homes that are unsafe or things that are going to crack the electric grid because we have all this inventory coming online, but our utility grid can't handle it.
Yeah.
Because everybody put tankless water heaters in their house, and tankless water heaters pull a ton of kilowatts, right?
Yeah.
And that's going on in St. Pete right now. They're having to upgrade a lot of electrical infrastructure just because of tankless water heaters.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, just because of tankless water heaters. I did an ADU in January, and they upgraded my transformer for free. I built that exact same home a couple blocks down. And they were like, hey, our new policy is you have to pay to upgrade the transformer if you put an electric tankless water heater in.
Oh, wow.
And it was like $5,000. So we switched from tankless to tank. And so, people are figuring this out now. You see in Texas, the freeze that happened and how catastrophic it was to that whole infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're trying not to do, right? So it sucks. To your point, it is a barrier to entry to bringing supply online. It's going to slow things down. Figuring it out, when you're the guy that figures it out, you're the guy that gets paid for having been the guy that figures it out, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of money in solving those problems.
I was going to say that too. I know as a business, we love barriers to entry, right? It requires you to be better, but if you're better, then you have a more defensible business, and there's a lot of benefits, right? It's harder, but I think we are good at doing the hard things well, so we like that, and I think there's a similar thing too with what you're doing, right? If you can really figure out the best builders, you're going to benefit once, when you get those systems put together, and it makes it harder for new entrants to come in and compete with you, right? And I think that's definitely different ways to look at it, right? But that's certainly a glass half full way of looking at it. But I know it's a big issue. We talked a little bit about the affordability thing. There's a lot of, and you rattled off a handful of ways to address that. One of those ways is density, right? Density and smaller dwelling units, right? And I think you're starting to see a lot more of that stuff come online. Is that something you're looking at all when you think about projects that you might want to take on? I know you're doing some ADU stuff and things like that kind of fall into that category.
Yeah, we're definitely looking at, how much space do you need? So we typically, not that we wouldn't, but we just typically haven't built anything over about 2,500 heated square feet.
Okay.
And I think when you go out into the suburbs, it kind of looks silly, right? We're building a 2,000 square foot house in the city. We build specifically in the city of Tampa and in the city of St. Petersburg.
Okay.
It's kind of our niche. We don't really like to go outside of city limits. Well, you go out to the burbs and you can get a 4,000 square foot monster house for $500,000. And you come over to where we're building and you're going to pay $650 for a 2,500 square foot house or 2,000 square foot house, right? And there's a lot of people go, what? It doesn't make sense, right? And it's a lifestyle. It's access to amenities. It's access to the areas around. And I think people were attracted to square footage for a long time because it was cheap. It was easy. Why not? If you could have more. In reality, look, I'm in my mid 30s. We don't want a 4,000 square foot house. I don't want to have that much furniture. I don't want to have to clean that many square feet. I don't want to have to replace that roof in 20 years, on a mega house. It's just, I think a lot of people are realizing like, I don't need it. Now there's a balance. There's the other side, right? We talk about building the ADUs and building small homes for people, which are great. I think a lot of people are realizing we don't need that space. We could downsize. Then you get to a point where there's also a lot of people working from home. So there's people who want dedicated offices.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard to fit in an ADU.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a tough. So, you're kind of seeing both ends of the spectrum here where I think I'm surprised. I don't know if this is a new phenomenon or what, but I'm surprised at how much demand there is for smaller. People don't care if the house is 1,500 or 1,700 square feet. It's unimportant. And there are people that will live in 800 square foot houses, 700 square foot houses, be perfectly fine. But then there's this whole other wave of people who are like, well, I'll take the 1,800 square feet, but I need a dedicated office space.
Yeah, designing for what people need and want. And those things are changing, right? I mean, I think, and we haven't found that there's some societal norms that are not set at the moment, right? COVID really threw a lot of things out of balance and really allowed for changes to accelerate. Working from home was a big thing that, is that going to stick around? Is that going to be, I know we have a hybrid kind of model and a lot of our business now is in remote markets. So, people are working from home in lots of different markets that we're in. Is that going to stick around? Is that going to be a thing? Probably, but who knows, right? And I think being able to pay close attention to that, you look at the environment, from my perspective anyway, it's hard to imagine the Gen Z group that's in their 20s today, like how it's going to be very difficult. Either they're going to have to wait a lot longer to save enough, or, maybe bank of mom and dad for down payments to afford, even if they're making really good money. It's reasonable, I would think, to assume that, people will start getting used to living in smaller spaces. I mean, that's one way to crack the affordability code and help people get into home ownership. Conversely, and I think it's a very well documented thing these days that it's a lot cheaper to rent in a lot of markets than it is to own, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the delta between renting and owning has probably never been higher. If I had to guess, maybe that might not be true, but at least in the recent past.
I see that number frequently. I see people talk about that frequently, and that's an interesting concept, right? There's a lot of people, a lot of friends I know, right? I try not to look at national news, right? I try to talk to people like you and me and say, what do you think? And that's kind of where we underwrite from that perspective. Our thought is by the time the data has been collected, reviewed, and now put out, it's too late.
Yeah,
that's old. Done. Yeah, it's old. So we're talking to regular people, and people are going, renting is way better. I don't have to worry about my roof leaking. I don't have to worry about this or that, and it allows them a certain level of mobility that homeownership doesn't. It's kind of the anti-American dream, if you will, right? A lot of people are kind of going against that classic mantra of, American dream homeownership. I think it's going to boil down to lifestyle. I think we're going to see some ebb, we're going to see some flow. At the end of the day, if you want stability, if your kids are in a local school, if you're a member of that community, you want something that's going to plant you there. And that's not going to be a financially driven decision. It's going to be a lifestyle driven decision. If you want something that's going to be, if you're okay with mobility, if you're okay with a little bit of uncertainty, possibly having to move, possibly rents changing, having neighbors that are changing regularly, then you're going to be perfectly fine renting. And Like, I rented for a long time. I know homeowners right now that are considering selling their home and renting
I believe it.
because it's easier, right?
I mean,
It's one less thing to worry about.
it makes a lot of sense. You know, the maintenance, the bills that pop up, the insurance, like to know exactly what you are going to pay every month or whatever, what your housing costs are going to be, you know, to the penny, basically, outside of utilities. That's a really nice thing, you know, and there are some amazing, and that's kind of why like the build for rent thing is very interesting to me, because I do think that there's a lot of people that value the flexibility, especially the younger generation that, you know, really does love their freedom and to be able to move around. And now, and if working, you know, if your job is flexible and you can work from home, then technically you can kind of work from lots of places. I think there's real value to that. But if, you know, housing prices jump or for whatever reason, those units can all be converted into, you know, that you can sell those, right, as an owner. And last week at the event we did in Charlotte, we had a gentleman who's the CEO of a sizable home builder, like 600, 700 homes a year. And a guy that runs or, you know, helps run a fund that, you know, I think they own 5,000, 6,000, you know, build for rent units, developing tons more. And, you know, they're obviously very bullish on that play, but, you know, I think there's a lot of interesting things to it. Do you ever keep any of your projects? Or you sell
For
everything?
sure. No. So I actually have 2 new construction build to rent units in permitting right now.
Awesome.
That'll be for me. And I've kept rentals over the years. Not a ton. What we've looked at is we look at it on an annual basis. If we have a deal that makes sense as both a flip and a rental, we'll look at you know, what we've made that year. We'll look at our tax liabilities and you know, we'll see, does it cash flow? I as of today, right? Who knows? Ask me again in 5 years. But as of now, we won't buy something just for the tax benefit, or we won't buy something just for the cash flow, or we won't buy something just to keep it in inventory. You know, single family homes are notorious for not really putting out that much cash flow.
Right.
Right. You have to have them in volume. And so we analyze on a deal by deal basis. Hey, we've made enough money. You know, we'll get some tax benefit from it. We'll get some cash flow from it. We're bullish on the area long term. We refit the house the same way.
Sure.
Whether it's a rental or a flip, it's going to get all new wiring. It's going to get all new plumbing. It's going to get a new roof. It's going to get new windows. So, you know, we'll kind of make that decision as we start to wrap it up. You know, hey, can we put a tenant in it and cash flow $500 a month? Do we need the income from it?
Sure.
And if the answers to those questions all align, then we keep it. So I'm also really big on, I like to do something for myself before I do it for a client. I don't like to experiment with clients anymore. I did in the past. So the build to rent idea is interesting to me. We started seeing the build to rent pop up 5 or 6 years ago. We were first kind of looking at real estate. And we always thought it was a no-brainer. Like, why did capital markets not get involved at a large scale in build to rent 20 years ago? When you look net of, you know, what the payoff looks like, how easy it is to acquire debt, how much leverage you can get, how cheap the debt is. I mean, there's just a lot of benefits to owning a ton of build to rent at scale. You know, great depreciation benefits. If you're building them, like we're an Energy Star builder, if you're building Energy Star houses, which is harder to do today than it was 2 years ago, you're getting a ton of, you know, additional tax benefits from that. So, yeah, it's something we're excited about. We're going to do a main house in an ADU for ourselves, see what that price is out like, see what that works like, and then have that as kind of a model unit for other investors as well. Understand those costs and you know, what the rents look like. And yeah, so, you know, we think build to rent is exciting. It's great to do. Now, what happens when Lennar comes in and starts doing build to rent at 2,000 units in a subdivision, right? You know, how much demand will there be for my little old, you know, house at that point? It's going to be interesting to see. When the amount of rental inventory that's coming on the market is crazy. But like I said, there's less homeowners buying homes, so you know, it's gonna be fun to watch. You know,
Definitely.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch for the next couple of years.
Well, I love your approach, right? Like kind of putting a toe in, seeing how it goes, like experimenting with it a little bit. And, you know, I mean, and I don't know the numbers locally, but if renting is whatever, 15% cheaper than owning, like in theory, the cost of owning is not going to come down that much, because let's be honest, like a lot of people out there are like, oh man, when rates come down, it's going to be great. All these people are going to jump in. Well, guess what? Asset prices straight up, right? Like when rates come down, homes are going to be more expensive, and that offset, how much lower is my monthly, commitment to this house is probably not going to be that much lower.
Well, and that's assuming that the demand of buyers still have a taste for homeownership.
Well, that's a great point.
Right?
Yeah, the trend piece. And
if people keep moving to renting, they go, man, this is kind of nice.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about it. Maybe next go round, they go, yeah, maybe I'll sit this one out. Maybe I don't want to go back to homeownership.
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
Totally. Well, I mean, but I think at the end of the day, regardless, the point really is that cost of owning a home is going to remain pretty elevated. I think that's a reasonable assumption. Could be wrong. Reasonable assumption.
I agree with that.
And if the cost of rent is so much lower, like in theory, right, you've got a lot of room for rents to come up before that starts to become a more difficult conversation again. So if your deal works as a rental today, you can probably assume you're going to be able to raise rents, in a reasonable fashion over, the next handful of years in the future. And it'll probably work even better then. And it'll also be, could be if home ownership or if the market to sell the homes, improves, it'd, be a great asset. Then it seems like it just gives you a lot of exit opportunities.
Sure.
And, different ways to kind of play it depending on what works for you and your business at that time. So it seems like a good time if I'm you, right? And you have the ability to be nimble and to try things to try it, right? And I think there's a lot of people out there too that are, willing to partner on some of those deals too, to get, to jump into a little bit larger projects if that's something that you're interested in. I know a lot of folks sitting on, land positions that they've had for a while that are open to those types of conversations. So anyway, the point is, I think lots of room to grow.
I think we were talking earlier about the local market, right? And the local challenges. And permitting is something that's tough to do here, especially in Tampa and St. Pete. It's a slow process. It's a grueling process. I feel, my personal opinion, and it's pretty well known that the building department knows I feel this way. I make it known that they can constantly move the goalpost, right? So it's tough to do. In Florida, we have other challenges as well. Homeowners insurance has become a pandemic here. It is a huge issue. It's grown at a rate that has far exceeded anyone's expectations. Between that and interest rates and tax-free assessments, it's made a lot of people's rental portfolios bust.
It's a great point.
And so I think that as real estate investors, we have to, I'm not trying to get too social responsibility on you, right? Like I get it. We're here to make a buck. But I think we have to do a better job of looking at ourselves as members of the community. If we continue to take a $200,000 house and do nothing to improve the structure of that home, but bring its value up to $500,000, the stress that we are putting on local insurance companies is significant, right? So now they have to insure something that is worth a lot more than it was, but has the same risk factor that it did prior, at its previous homeowner level. I'm not saying this to defend insurance companies, okay? I do think insurance companies get a bad rap. I think a lot of people have this idea that insurance companies make huge margins. They're not. Insurance companies are capital-driven companies, right? Yes. And they are a free market that compete against each other, just like any other industry. Trust me, insurance companies want to be competitive and want to earn your business as well. So I think in Florida, what's happening is we are adding a lot of inventory online, bringing a lot of people in, and we're having to build out an infrastructure locally with our municipalities that costs money. So I don't think taxes are going down, right? I think that home prices are rising. And if people aren't building better houses that are able to withstand storms better, then insurance will continue to rise. And when you have taxes and insurance rising, interest rates to boot, it's tough to be a landlord in Florida right now. So where that leaves us net, all of these different factors, I don't know, right? I don't pretend to know. I think it's a fun conversation to have. I think it's an interesting thing to think about. It's part of the reason that we diversify. And it's part of the reason that we don't necessarily want to scale, right? To us, there's too much volatility in the market right now for us to talk about bringing on a huge amount of units, bringing on a lot of debt, right? We're going to let things calm down a little bit. We're going to sharpen our tools. We're going to lay everything out. We're going to get everything ready. We're still going to be making buku money between now and then, right? We're still going to be gangbusters, but there's a reason that we have that investor element. There's a reason we have that spec element, and there's a reason we have that retail, element, right? So we can get reps in the process and the systems, and should something change, we're ready to go gangbusters.
Yeah.
Right. Someone bring me $100 million and let's go build a bunch of subdivisions. Right. But I'm not doing that today. I have no interest in that today.
Well, I think it's great. I mean, you clearly are willing to kind of let that stuff come to you, right? And I think, just in listening to your story over this, this interview here, I think it's pretty clear that you've taken that approach in, in a lot of different, parts of your journey, right? Where you're willing to kind of let the right thing kind of come to you, but being prepared for lots of things. And I think that's fantastic for your business as it sits today. To have that diversification and to be getting the reps, as you put it, in these different kind of strategies to be able to put yourself in a position to take advantage of an opportunity should one arise, or, should it feel like a good time to really go harder. I think that's a really smart way to run your business. But, you exemplify something that I think in some cases is not all that common with investors, which is, I think a lot of real estate investors get caught up in the more is more,
sure.
Right?
The more is the more is the more.
Yeah, just like, constantly chasing this thing. I think a lot of people don't sit back and ask the question of like, why do I want that? Do I want that because that's what everybody tells me I should be doing, or because the guys that I follow, the podcasts I listen to, whatever, these people are all doing these things that's success. I should do that. But is that really what you want? Is that really getting you closer to what matters to you? It may and it may not, but I think it seems like you've kind of asked yourself some of those questions. And today the answer is like, keeping your business at a manageable size that makes the money you want to make, but not feeling like it's not working if you're not like the number one home builder in the market. You know what I mean?
No interest.
Yeah.
If I become the number one home builder in Tampa, we got a lot of problems. We want to have fun. At the end of the day, we want to have fun. I've worked for people and had a lot of fun. I've worked for people and not had a lot of fun. I've worked for myself and had fun and not had a lot of fun. And I'll choose fun 10 to 1, right? When you take all the bullshit out of it, and you talk about what do I need to enjoy my life and have a good time, it's a lot less than what you think. If you're taking care of yourself. I don't have a morning routine that I get up and go through and dial in every day. I probably should. I'm kind of working on some level of, I guess, routine throughout my day now that I'm, managing a lot more projects. It's, a little bit more necessary. But at the end of the day, we are fortunate enough to be able to do what interests us. So if somebody brings us a project we find interesting, we do it.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a client that we find interesting, we do it. If somebody brings us a project that's super profitable, but we don't like it, we don't do it. If there's a client that has an awesome project, but we think they're going to be a pain in the butt, then we don't do it. A lot of my friends and family say, oh, you need to hire these people, you need to hire those people, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to grow. And I'm like, then I have to manage those people. Then I have to take on projects to move those salaries. And then I think it becomes less fun. Will that happen one day? Maybe. I have no aspirations to chase a Lennar. I have no aspirations to be bringing 100 units a year online. We want to be deeper. We want to focus on margins. We want to focus on quality output. I tell people we are the most custom spec home builder in the Tampa Bay area. There is not another more custom spec home builder in our price point, sub $1 million.
Okay.
I think when you get into spec homes that are, 1.5 to 3, you get some guys that are building some pretty sweet custom homes. CNC Homes, Ryan. Those guys do a really good job of building some really nice stuff. Big fan. They've been, very helpful in helping me kind of figure things out and get to where I am. But sub $1 million, there's a lot of cookie cutter stuff out there. Great builders building great things, not custom.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference, and we enjoy that. We like that. We like having that badge of pride. And if it means we do 10 deals instead of 12 deals or 15 deals, I don't think it changes my life. I'm not going to, if I do 15 deals this year instead of 10 deals, I'm not going to buy a different car. I'm not going to go move into a different house. I'm not going to take an extra vacation because of it. And if anything, I might not get to take a vacation.
Right.
Right. So, it's like, we want to make a healthy living for sure.
I think that's great. And I love the comment about going deeper and really focusing on quality. And I think that's probably why we've developed a good relationship, and why Renovo has been a fit for you and some of the, because I think we think about it that way too, right? We want to, for example, in Tampa here, we want to build a really great local lending business, and we want to go super deep here and be a really important part of what I consider like the investor ecosystem. But that's the model that we're trying to scale, is going super deep in every market that we're in, as opposed to like, oh, we lend anywhere and we can do any deal. Like, not interesting. We want to be able to bring value to clients and really go deep and focus on really high quality borrowers, because we can then partner and have long relationships with them. And that's exciting and interesting and fun for us, right? You found that in your business by, putting yourself in a position to be able to say, you know what, I might make a bunch of money, but that's more than I'm really willing to bite off. Or that client does seem like it might be a bit of a challenge. I don't need that. And I think giving yourself that freedom is amazing. And
maybe one day I will.
Yeah.
But today I don't.
Yeah. So, we can always reserve the right to evolve. Right. But I think it's a good place to be. And, you're a relatively young guy, you're relatively young in the business. You've gotten a lot of experience, but you've got a long career ahead of you. Who knows where things will go? But
exactly,
being open and being willing to sort of take the opportunities as they come, as opposed to a lot of people, I think, feel like they need to manufacture opportunity, right? And to stay out of that, because that's how you get yourself in trouble.
Sure.
I think when you start trying to manufacture opportunity, to your point, to support a big organization, we've got to keep deal flow coming through these pipes, or these people don't have anything to do. That's how you end up making weird decisions that don't have, optimal outcomes, because you're now introducing a new variable that's not natural, right? And
and to speak about, you guys having local boots on the ground, I think that's one thing that has overlooked in a lot of people's business. So, and part of our strategy to scale without growing, if you will, or grow without scaling, however you want to look at that, I try not to hire, right? I don't want to have a bunch of employees. I like to have job specific people, 1099s, subcontractors, right? It's tough because there are cracks that have to get filled. But when we think about where is it that we can bring people on and not have to own them, right?
Sure.
Not have to own that labor cost, that, the taxes, the vacation days, all the regulation that comes around with having employees in the United States.
For sure.
Own that responsibility is probably a better way to say it. And so, we look at who can we partner with strategically to help our business without costing us anything, right? And that's where you guys have been super helpful. So I have accounts with some of the big national lenders, lines of credit and things that I can draw from, and they're very quick, very well set up, but they don't know the local market, right? And what Renovo's done here, not to plug you guys or anything, but what you guys have done here is, you are lending to a lot of my biggest competitors. You're lending to a lot of movers and shakers in the marketplace. And so when you get an underwriting analysis from that underwriter, it's nice to know that you're confirming and validating, right? I can go get private money from this guy who isn't going to look at my deal. But I better be right.
Yeah.
And when I go to a lender, you go to a lender and they're going to do a desktop appraisal or whatever, right?
Sure.
But those teams that I have for those other lenders are not in Tampa. They're not in Florida. They're remote. Your team knows the market here really, really well, and some areas better than I do. So I'm calling saying, hey, is this typical of what you're seeing in this area? Is this, is based on what you're seeing, is this something you think, does this feel high to you? Does it feel low to you? And then, with my background being in risk management and insurance, I really appreciate you guys almost seemingly strict insurance requirements. Because, again, I've seen what happens when you're go out and buy the cheapest policy and put it. Look, I when I was a young 20-something year old, My apartment burned down when I lived in. Not my fault, right? I've used insurance. I've totaled vehicles. I've used insurance. I've worked for insurance companies. I've consulted for insurance companies. I've consulted for claims companies. I'm very familiar with insurance products. And there's a lot of lenders out here that will throw an appraisal out that makes a number work, accept whatever policy you give them, and there's no meat. There's no meat there. There's no risk management. And you guys take protecting your capital seriously, which means you're also protecting my asset, and you're taking that seriously. And so, yeah, I think it works well. I think you know, your local knowledge and your underwriting process, it's seamless. It doesn't seem like it's a lot of work, but just from knowing you guys really well, I know the thought that goes into these things. And you know, yeah. So could I go to Kiavi and borrow $3 million tomorrow? Sure, no problem. They don't know anything about West Tampa versus Seminole Heights.
Sure.
They don't know anything about local government restrictions or local, you know, municipality challenges or local pricing. You know, it's very easy to just put that into a bulk kind of data analysis and spit out a general number, right? And so, yeah, so I don't have to hire anybody, but I essentially get another underwriter, and I get a risk management planner who's helping me, you know, make sure that I have the protections in place that in the event something should happen, I'm protected as well as you guys. And you know, we have a team that's working to make sure we're successful, because our success is tied to your success and vice versa, man. You know,
I mean, directly
we're in it together, right?
Directly tied.
And I don't have to pay you for that. That's you know, I'd pay you what I'd pay, you know, anybody else. Sometimes you guys are more competitive and it's fantastic. But
first of all, I appreciate you saying all those things. And for the record, I did not ask.
No, I mean it. I mean, there's a reason
we
deal with you guys.
Well, but I
get a lot of people to choose from.
Yeah, well, that's right. And I think, you know, that's, again, like, you know, there's a lot of choice. There's a lot of great lenders out there. And you mentioned one, right? Kiavi is they're very good at what they do. And I think not in every, but in a lot of investors' business, there's plenty of room for multiple lenders for different things. And there's different lenders that are good at some projects are going to be really great fit for certain types of lenders. I think what we try to do, and it sounds like we've been successful, you know, in our relationship with you, is like we try to bring a ton of value, because pricing and terms are very, very similar. You know, we live in a world today, and it wasn't the case maybe 10 years ago in this business, but it's a very commoditized world. Like especially the down the middle products, the fix and flip, you know, under $1 million, like, you know, that stuff is very commoditized, and pricing and terms are very, very similar across the board. So we feel like the only way we can really, what we want to do is build long-term relationships with our customers. It's hard to do that if you're just competing on price and if it's a commodity. So we feel like we need to bring value to our customer. And we do that by having people like John, who's really amazing at what he does, works extremely hard for his clients, and is very knowledgeable, that we can leverage that to bring value in lots of different ways. But this is the first time I think I've actually heard somebody talk about the value of the underwriting confirming, you know, and being something that you can kind of have a lot of confidence over. Renovo says that this, you know, if they agree with value or with this product, like that's a stamp of approval. That means something. And I think that's an interesting way to look at it. I hadn't really thought of that. But at the end of the day, we want to work with the best clients. We want to try to find ways to bring value. That will change over time. There'll be your business will evolve. You know, our business is evolving all the time, new products, new things. And you know, if we can just kind of find ways to be valuable and maintain that relationship, I think that gets us all to where we want to go. And you're exactly right. You know, our objective is to help you grow your business, because if you grow, then we grow. And that's something that we want to think about and go really deep with our customers. And it sounds like we have a similar philosophy that does seem to match up, which is what you're looking for, right? That's why we hire guys like John, because John's amazing at finding the customers that are a good fit, and then we can bring value to. And I think if we keep doing that, we'll be where we need to be.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't use you for everything. We still use private capital. We still have access to other lenders. But all in all, you know, you look at who's my best material supplier. And I don't go to Home Depot for things I buy from the lumberyard. I don't go to the lumberyard for things I buy from Home Depot.
Yep.
And there are certain things that I will only buy from Lowe's, and I won't buy from Home Depot, and vice versa. And so you got to know, you know, what tool fits what best, and you know, what allows us to scale and do the volume that we do, which may not be a lot to a lot of people, but it's a lot to some people.
Sure.
Is the fact that we have strategic partnerships. I have a sales guy at one of my suppliers that I don't care if he's 5% higher than somebody else, because his customer service makes my job 10 times easier.
Yep.
I can do 2 more jobs because that sales guy makes my job easier. So, do I want to hire somebody to manage that process? Or do I just want to pay another vendor only for that product, a slight margin more, only when I need it, right? That's a job cost. It's way easier to be profitable associating things to job costs than taking on, general overhead.
Yep.
Right? I mean, then you build it in your margins. Hey, I need to make this much on it because I'm going to have this much. It's going to cost me this much to do it. We found this easier way.
No, I love that. I mean, and everybody's a little bit different, but like I said, it sounds like we kind of, we see that part of the business in a similar way, which is great. Listen, you've been extremely generous with your time, and I really appreciate it. I think this conversation's been super interesting. I want to kind of move us towards kind of wrapping it up. But obviously you're out there, you're doing projects for lots of folks, including yourself. How do people get in touch with you if they're maybe looking for a great builder or want to talk business? Yeah.
So the name of our company is it's here on the hat, 7 Pines, the number 7 Pines Development Company, Design Build. And we do have a website with my phone number, my email on it. We specifically are working in the Tampa city limits, and specifically in St. Pete city limits. For the right customer, we might go to the county, but I get a lot of people that call me, hey, will you build for me in Lakeland, or will you build for me in Pasco? And I think that especially here in this local market, there's a huge benefit to having somebody that deals with the municipality you're building in. Because Tampa, their underwriting process and what they're looking for on the engineered plans is very different than what Pinellas is looking for. It's very different than what Pasco is looking for. And so I see a lot of friction points with people bringing in outside contractors that, sure, they can do it, they can build it, right? But what's the permitting process going to look like? Do they understand the nuances of how they want their drainage plans, the notations that they want, the survey? Tampa wants 20 feet into your neighbor's yard. By the way, Tampa also wants you to survey both your neighbor's houses on the left and right side as part of your survey and submission.
Wow.
There's nuances to these things. So if somebody has a project that they feel like is within those parameters and they need some help, we'll build it for them. We'll consult with them. We've got some owner builders that are like, hey, I want to build my own house. I want to do it all myself, but I need someone to be here for me to bounce questions off of, right? Yeah. We'll do that. We'll do consulting.
Oh, cool. That's neat.
Yeah. Well, it's me, right? I mean, how can I help you? And of course, there's a price for all of it.
Sure.
None of it's free. But if we're able to provide a value and help you out, we'd love to.
That's awesome. That's what it's all about. Well, listen, I think and we covered a lot of stuff. I really, like I said, I really appreciate the time and going into all of this stuff with me today. It's been really cool to get a chance to know you a little bit better. And we look forward to trying to be of value for you in the future. But in the meantime, we can wrap this thing up. Any last things you want to share with the audience?
No, I think we've covered most of it. We'll talk about some more stuff offline.
There you go. Awesome. Thank you again for your time. This has been great.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers.